Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. So what's this pile of parts that I've got here today? And believe it or not, this is actually a 1987 Fender Sidekick 15 Reverb. And it's a made in Taiwan amp. It's kind of a cool little amp because it's got an actual spring reverb in it, but it's solid state, really small form factor, and they're pretty well regarded in terms of Fender's early solid state amps. This one has an actual plywood baffle. It's not particle board. It does have a particle board cabinet, and it has some plywood mounting surfaces for the back plate. This came to me as a pile of parts, and so what I'm going to do, I've got a couple of pots that I've got to replace for sure. I've got a cord that I need to replace, and I'm going to have to see what else it needs after that. So I'm going to start with the pots. So this component board is pretty easy to solder on. It's a bigger PCB than some of the more modern amps have, and you can see the components are quite a bit larger, especially the resistors. This one needs two pots. It needs a 50K pot and a 100K pot. These pots are just pins that poke through the PCB and get soldered to the back side. And these two pots happen to be the middle and the base tone pot. There's a 50K and a 100K. These are audio taper pots, and that's what I've got as replacements. On this 3-prong power cord, there's only one connection to the board itself, and that is this center white wire. And if you heat that up, it'll come right out. And then I've only got to desolder this hot black wire from the switch. The ground wire comes out with a screw, but I'm going to go ahead and take this support cuff. Alright, that frees my power cable. Installation of a new power cord is just a matter of getting the new power cord, obviously, clamping it down with the cord clamp, and reinstalling your black and your white wires in the appropriate places, soldering them in, and installing a lug on the green ground wire and screwing that back into the chassis. Now I have to attempt to reassemble this amp with the pieces that were provided, and I'm pretty sure I have everything. So the jack for the headphones, it probably needs to go in first, and then I will attempt to seat the board. I'm gonna have to play around with these two new pots just to make sure I can't get them to come out any farther. This reverb is actually in there a little bit too deep too, so I'm gonna wiggle around all this stuff, and I'll come back whenever I've got to install the nuts on the front. Alright, so after fighting with the pots a little bit, I've got all the nuts placed on here, not tight, nothing's tight. I went ahead and put the screws into the base plate for the PCB and for this transformer here. Now I'm just going to tighten the nuts on the front of this thing. Now the jack here for the headphones is a plastic jack. Not something that I'm in favor of, but I don't have a replacement for a stereo jack like this, and it's got some weird little PCB tied to it that connects to the speaker output, so I can't do anything about an upgrade on that. But I did consider upgrading the jack over here for the input. I'm going to leave it for now. It's a little bit better jack. It's just corroded, and I'm worried about the corrosion. Right, I've got everything together, and I've been kind of going through this parts bag, just making sure that I have everything. And I think I've located the screws for the handle. So I'm going to go ahead and mount this thing next. It looks like it just goes right back in there, right about there. I think these big black screws are the case screws for the speaker baffle. And there should be a couple more screws that go from the head to the baffle on the front. And there's 6 screws on the back, so I'm going to guess that these black ones are for the back, and that these are for the baffle here. But I do seem to have an extra screw. Well, I don't see what the extra screw would be for, so I'm going to guess that these silver ones are for the baffle. Oh, I do see what it's for. It's for this cord cleat here. Got to plug the speaker back in. Looks like everything's labeled. Alright, well that's as far as I can take reassembly, so I'm going to go ahead and test this thing out, I guess. Hopefully nothing blows up when I turn it on. All right, so far so good. Need a guitar. Well, I want to run this amp through its paces just a little bit, just to make sure that all my repairs are good. So I'm going to leave the treble, middle, and bass at their middle points and try the volume, gain, and master out to see how they affect each other. I'll also add some reverb and see what that does to the mix. I'm just using a regular Strat here. I've got a Texas Special and the bridge, and I've got just a regular made in Mexico middle pickup that I'm going to be using. Right now the settings are only 2 on the volume, no gain, and 2 on the master. Well, that sounds pretty sweet. Let's add about half volume, and I'm going to bring the master back down to about 1. That makes it a little bit dirtier. Let's go ahead and see what all the volume does. Well, that adds a little bit more dirt to it, but I'm imagining that it's not going to be anywhere near as much as when we start using the gain channel. So I'm going to go back about half volume, add about half the gain, and see what happens. That sounds pretty dirty. See what all the gain does. And all the volume and all the gain. Yeah, it gets, cracked up pretty good there. Doesn't quite sound very tube amp-like, but it has pretty decent function to it. And I'm actually guessing you could add more gain with the tone controls. You can already hear it in the static. Yeah, I mean, that does start to crunch up really good there. But let's go back to sort of a baseline setting, taking all the gain out of it. I'm going to go about 2 on the master and 2 on the volume again. Let's just see what maybe a quarter of the reverb sounds like. A little bit of a Hall effect there. Let's see what 5 sounds like. Yeah, and then all the reverb. Alright, well that actually sounds really good. It's got that kind of traditional reverb effect to it, and it doesn't sound electronic. It sounds very spring-like. And I think the nice thing about this amp that I noticed earlier when I was playing with it is you can bang on it and it doesn't make that spring sound against the side of the reverb case. And I think that's just because of the size of the reverb tank. It's so small, but it works really well. And if your buddy walks up and kicks your amp in the middle of a set, it's not going to make a huge noise. So interesting and cool. Alright, well this completes the Sidekick 15 Reverb, and like I said, I really like these little amps. This is the Taiwan version. I'd love to find myself one of the Japanese versions that's just a little bit earlier than this one and try it out, but I suspect they're pretty much the same. They're bulletproof, there really isn't a whole lot of components to them, they're easy to work on. I think they're just a kind of a perfect old solid state amp, no maintenance, just works. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me through this episode. I love it when you guys like and comment. I'll put some links in my description to some of the parts that I used for the repairs. That'll be to Amazon, so feel free to shop there and help me out. And I'm always thrilled whenever you guys subscribe. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you guys next time.